Welcome everyone to this episode of Keto Chat. I am your host, Carole Freeman, and I am a certified nutritionist and creator of the Fast Track to Keto Success program. Today, I'm honored to have our guest, Gillian Szollos. I had to write down how to say it correctly. So welcome. Let me just give a real quick introduction to let people know who you are, and then we're going to dive in more and you'll get to tell all your story. And oh my gosh, I can't wait. We're going to have a really great conversation today. So Gillian is a health promotion consultant with a passion for helping ordinary people achieve extraordinary results with a ketogenic lifestyle. In 2014, she was diagnosed with a left temporal lobe epilepsy. And 3 months and hundreds of seizures later, she discovered a ketogenic diet and has been seizure-free ever since. Her experience has led to a passion for sharing the benefits of nutritional ketosis, as well as the power of a therapeutic ketosis to change lives and in many cases save them. I feel privileged to be able to, she says, I feel privileged to be able to share the stories of those who use keto as a therapy to improve their quality of life. Welcome, Gillian. We got to meet at KetoCon down in Austin, Texas, in September 2017. And we really hit it off and couldn't wait to talk more because we're both so passionate about helping people heal. So tell us more about that story, relatively your diagnosis, what was going on, what was that like? Oh gosh, that was a lot of questions all in one there.
I can handle it, Carole. Don't worry, okay. I can handle it. So I have to back up a little bit because originally I was diagnosed with epilepsy when I was a child.
Okay.
So my mom was a pediatric nurse and a really, really smart woman. And somewhere around the age of 8 or 9, she noticed that I was having absent seizures. And She wasn't sure they were seizures at the time, but she was pretty savvy and she figured something was wrong. And so I was sent to the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario here in Ottawa, where the chief neurologist told my mother flat out that what I had could not be epilepsy because I was not losing control of my bowels or my bladder.
Okay.
As we all know, is absolutely not a requirement for an epilepsy diagnosis. Wow. However, at the time, that's what she was told. And of course, she knew better, but it meant that I did not receive any further follow-up. In fact, I was seen by psychiatrists for the next 3 years because they said it was all in my head.
So what was tell us, we're going to have a lot of viewers that don't know much about epilepsy at all. So share with us, like, what was your mom seeing that led her to think that you were having an absence seizure, and what is that?
Sure. Well, there are many different types of seizures. Epilepsy is a really interesting diagnosis because it can happen for a lot of reasons, and the seizures can be very, very different. Some people just look as if they're zoning out for a few seconds. Often for me, I would lock on to a feature in the room in front of me and I would just stare very, very intently at it for a few seconds. Sometimes I would hyperventilate. As my seizures progressed, I would do the locking on, the hyperventilation, and then I would need to get to the floor very quickly. I did not have drop seizures where I instantly blacked out. I was able to remember most of what people were saying to me, but I was unable to respond. So that's sort of typically what was going on at that time. But when I was 14, we moved, and at a Christmas party, my mother got the neighbor, who happened to be a very well-respected neurologist, in a corner and said, "Hey, could you please see my daughter?" And he agreed to see me the following week, ran a battery of tests, and within a week had diagnosed me with classic left temporal lobe epilepsy and put me on Tegretol. And Tegretol, basically I had one grand mal seizure after that, and then I went 4 years of being seizure free. But in that 4 years, I also had absolutely no working memory. So it was very, very difficult for me, and it meant school was hard, and I was going to university, and I really wanted to practice medicine. But it became obvious that my memory had been so severely, compromised by the medication that, medicine probably wasn't going to be the best choice. So I ended up in a sociology degree, but that's another story. So when I went to university at 18, I stopped all the medication because I was really finding it just too much of a struggle, having to basically study for exams 2 days before because I couldn't retain the information that was beforehand. So that was a real struggle. But once I stopped at 18, I did not have another seizure. So I went on merrily through my life. I had babies. I had a couple of auras that would happen around pregnancy or after pregnancy. And, I'd sort of think, maybe I should get checked, and I'd go and I'd have an EEG and they'd say, yeah, there's something wrong with your brain, but you're not having seizures, so have a nice day. And that sort of happened maybe 4 times between the age of 18 and the age of 44.
Okay.
I'm horrified to have to admit to everybody how old I am, but hopefully I look okay for 48, which is what I am now. But anyway, at 44, which was in 2014, I was driving home from the accountant's office. I was really proud of myself. I just finished my accounting. It was a beautiful, beautiful day. And I had a massive aura. And my auras are quite uncomfortable. They are that sort of gastric rising that you hear people talking about. I have described it as being like every cell in my body having a minor explosion. It's like champagne bubbles, but not nice champagne bubbles.
Okay.
So it was very obvious to me, though, that there was something very wrong. It was the strongest aura I've ever had, other than ones that precede seizures. And I realized that I really was going to have to find another neurologist, because it's been 30 years since I'd seen one.
Okay.
So I came home. That was, I think it was a Thursday or Friday. And then I had another seizure 2 days later. And then on the Monday, I had promised my husband faithfully that I was going to go and get checked out, because I just told him I wasn't feeling well. And I went to the doctor on Monday, and unfortunately my doctor, who had been with me for 25 years, had just retired, and I had a brand new doctor who wasn't even set up yet. So I had to basically go to a walk-in clinic and say, can I have a neurology consult, please? And they gave me one, and I went back to work, and my husband picked me up for lunch, and we took a corner in the truck, and I had a full-blown seizure in the car. And he had never seen me have a seizure. In fact, when I came out of it and he was freaking out, and I said, I'm okay, it's just a seizure. And he said, what do you mean it's just a seizure? I mean, why didn't you tell me that you had epilepsy? We'd been married for 15 years. And honestly, I didn't think to tell him, because I didn't think I still had it. It wasn't something that had been a part of my reality for a really long time. So it was very distressing. But of course, I'm a Virgo and a type A, and I was in denial. So I went back to work and had an interview with a client that I needed to see that day. And one of my colleagues, I work in a community health center. So one of my colleagues, a nurse friend of mine, said, are you crazy? You need to be in the hospital now. And I said, well, not until I'm done, meeting with this client. I'll go after. And she took me, and my husband met me at the hospital. And I walked in there, and I said to the admitting nurse, how long a wait am I looking at? And she said, oh, about 7 hours. And I said, right, forget about it. I'll come back tomorrow. And she said, well, why are you here? And I said, well, I just had a seizure. And she said, okay, you can come on in now. Straight back. And I had a seizure again within 15 minutes of getting back into the ER. I was in a CT scanner. I had an MRI. I had an EKG. I had everything done and worked up within the next hour and a half. And I was sent out of the hospital, told, do not drive. You need to see a neurologist right away. And that was the beginning of hell. It was absolutely horrific time in our lives. First of all, the whole denial thing came into it again. I'm a busy person. I had projects on the go. I had, fundraising that I had fundraising projects that I initiated and was responsible for. And I had a really hard time letting go of that. In fact, I didn't let it go. I called into my HR department and said, please don't put me on leave. I'll do it from home. I'll do what I have to do. And to their credit, they really did their best to help me continue to work, but I was seizing 8 times a day, and it was very, very difficult to keep things together, not being able to drive, not knowing what was happening. The more medication I got put on, the worse my seizures became. So I really decided that, and my husband might suggest that I'm a little bit of a control freak when it comes to these things, but I decided that I had to take some control over this, because I had no control. I was completely out of control, and I was seizing all night long and all day long. and nothing was within my control anymore except logging everything. So I started to track the days that I had seizures, the times that I had seizures, what kind of seizures they were, because that was changing as well. Whereas before they had been these sort of absent seizures, they'd last 30 seconds. I'd feel like throwing up afterwards, and then I'd need to sleep. Now they were lasting 5-10 minutes. They were Jacksonian March. They were, tonic-clonic seizures. Some of them were lasting 30 minutes. This is nothing I'd ever experienced before. And I could see a clear correlation within a couple of months to my hormones.
Okay.
So I began to see that there was an overlap between when I was ovulating and when I was having my period and the worst seizures. So I took this ream of information into my neurologist and said, hey, what do you think about this? And he said, oh yeah, that looks like catamenial seizures, which are seizures influenced by hormones.
Okay.
So I said, well, does this mean that it's happening because I'm perimenopausal? And he said, yeah, probably. But that was it. So things got worse and worse and more worse. And the medications, I was put on Keppra, which most people suggest is actually a really good place to start because it's got the least number of side effects. But I got to tell you, Carole, when you pull the leaflet out of the box, to most people, those are just words. But to people living with this, Keppra rage is a thing. And I'm not a ragey person. I'm a pretty lovey, huggy person, as you found out in Austin. But man, I was raging. I was screaming at my family. I was calling into work, bawling my eyes out. The only time in my life I've ever been suicidal was when I was on that medication. And one night, late in October, I was bored to tears, stuck in my house and unable to leave. I couldn't drive. My husband was trying to take care of me, my elderly parents, our teenage daughter. And man, he was doing an amazing job. But, I made the mistake of saying, honey, can you drive me to Michael's? Because, I want to do some baking. And he said, sure, I'll drive you to Michael's. And off we trekked. And he said, I just don't want to come in. If that's okay, I'll just wait in the truck. And I lost it at him. I completely blew up. I stormed out of the car. It was a freezing cold day. I had no appropriate clothes. And he found me 2.5 kilometers away, about to throw myself into an icy river.
Oh.
And it was that day that he decided we needed way more help than we were getting from the physicians supporting me. And he went onto Facebook. And I was actually a total Facebook phobia girl. At that time, I wasn't on Facebook. I had no social media at all. And Andrew went on and found this epilepsy support group that talked about a ketogenic diet. And he said to me, honey, have you ever heard of this? And I've been working in health for 20 years and I'd never heard of it. But of course, I started Googling, and within a few hours, it was obvious to me that this was something we needed to try. So my husband, who is the hero of this story, quite literally, he started reading everything he could get his hands on, started baking for me, started cooking for me. I went to my neurologist and said, I'm going to try this keto thing. And he laughed at me and said, only works for kids under 2. Oh, yeah, I know. It was frustrating. But, to his credit, afterwards, he did present my case at Grand Rounds at our local hospital. And,
oh.
And then my family doctor, who I said, yeah, I'm about to start eating, 89% fat every day. And I was 240 pounds at that time. I should also add that. She was not happy about that at all, but she had never heard of keto. And she said, do what you need to do. I know you're a smart person. And I said, look, I just need you to run the labs. I need to treat myself like an experiment. I'm going to give you a whack load of blood work. I just need you to run it so that we can stay on top of this and I can figure it out myself, because I couldn't find anyone in my community who was knowledgeable, including the hospital, by the way, because I did call them and they said, no, they only do it with kids, and they weren't willing to discuss it with me. So I got on the phone with Eric Kossoff at Johns Hopkins, and he was a darling and spent an hour on the phone with me and really put the foundation down for me. He told me where to start. He put me in touch with the Charlie Foundation. He gave me confidence, and I went at it. And Andrew cooked for me, and And I will never forget that on November the 5th, I had a 30-minute long seizure. I was alone with my daughter. I started October the 23rd, so exactly 2 weeks before November the 5th. I was alone at home with my daughter. I had this horrendous seizure that would not stop. So I kept sort of semi-surfacing out of it and then dropping again. And it was very, very frightening for both of us. And I said to my husband after that, look, I know the medication is making this worse. We have to stop the medication right now. And I guess they're going to have to try and find another medication. But the next day I saw my neurologist and I stopped the medication I was on. I started to titrate down and I didn't have another seizure. And then I didn't have another seizure. And then a week went by and I did not have another seizure. And then 49 days went by and I did not have another seizure. And then on day 49, I had an aura, a really strong aura. And it was the day before my period was due. So I looked at what I was doing with the ketogenic diet, which was obviously working for me. And I did a little bit of tweaking. I removed anything estrogenic from my diet. So I got rid of coffee. I got rid of soy. I got rid of heating anything in plastic. Anywhere I could get estrogens or pseudoestrogens into my system, I cut it out. And I boosted anything that would help me make progesterone because my estrogen and my progesterone were like this far away. And everyone, of course, said they're within normal, ranges, but they were very, very far away. And progesterone is somewhat protective against seizures and estrogen is somewhat not.
Okay.
So I did that little tweak and that's been it. I've been completely seizure free. I have my 3-year keto-versary coming up. And on top of that, I've lost 90 pounds.
90 pounds. Oops.
90 pounds. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
And you know what was funny about that was that I was a really healthy person before. I mean, all through my 20s, I exercised, I ate well, quote unquote, low fat, high fiber.
Yeah.
And, I could not lose the weight. I have lipedema and most of it's on my butt and I just could not lose the weight. But keto pulled it off me. And not only that, I had fibromyalgia that I was taking pain medication for and was really, really struggling with, all gone. My arthritis, which I was taking anti-inflammatories for, no longer required anti-inflammatories. The only time I do is if I go on really steep hikes, and then sometimes I'll need naproxen the day or two afterwards. But for the most part, the anti-inflammatory effects of the diet had a profound impact on my overall well-being. So seizures are just a part of this story. They're the thing that actually got me to be the healthiest version of me that I've been since I was 18. Most
of your story, I just keep getting waves of goosebumps and, most of your story of what you're sharing is like, oh, yep, see it all the time. But the story of epilepsy, I mean, I've worked with a couple of people with epilepsy, but it's not the major portion of who I work with. And so I just really appreciate hearing about that. And I think I know it's a really important thing we need to get out there because you probably know what's the percentage of population that has, diagnosed and undiagnosed epilepsy? Yeah. 1 in 100 people have epilepsy. Okay. 1 in 100. That's an awful lot of people. Yeah. It's sad. I talk to my friends who have epilepsy and they recount stories of waking up in hospital in handcuffs because when they have seizures, it looks to other people like they're drunk or having a mental breakdown. And that's really unfortunate. And I encourage everybody who's going to hear this and see this, go online and Google, what do seizures look like? Because you're going to see a lot of tonic-clonic seizures, which is what they tend to portray in the movies and TV shows and things. Yeah. But look up absent seizures. Just look up variety of seizures because there are so many. And it's important to know how to recognize them. And in fact, I had the great privilege of interviewing Mike Dancer when I was at the Metabolic Therapeutics Conference in Tampa in 2016, last February. Okay. And while we were doing the interview, actually right at the end, he had a seizure. And I knew that he was having a seizure. He didn't know yet, but I could see that it was coming. He had the full seizure. And then afterwards, he was conversing with me. We were having a full-blown conversation
but I knew he wasn't back yet. And anybody else would have thought, oh yeah, he's good to go, leave him on his own. But I was really uncomfortable doing that because I knew it was going to be another half hour before he could actually remember what was happening. It was just going to be that big missing chunk of time, which is really difficult. And it's, it's one of those disabilities that, that's scary to live with, especially for those who have drop seizures. I am extremely blessed that I have an aura. I have time, usually to, stop doing what I'm doing, get off the lawn tractor, stop riding my horse, whatever the situation is. I don't ride anymore, but I did when I was younger. And that was always the thing my mom was worried about. I would have a seizure while I was riding and I'd fall off. But thankfully I don't have that issue, but others do. And it's really terrible for me when I hear about people not even, dissing people who have epilepsy for a disability that they have no control over. And it can certainly make things really difficult. And that's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about this, because in Ontario, we actually have guidelines that have been published very recently for physicians and for people with epilepsy that say, try one medication, and if one doesn't work, try two. And if two don't work, try three. And if three don't work, try surgery. Nowhere in these guidelines does it suggest a dietary approach, even though the research is very clear that a ketogenic diet for a great number of people has a better seizure protective activity than any anti-epileptic drug on the market. And that's, like, to me, that's unethical not to give people that opportunity to try it. I mean, I found out about it because my husband loves me. I did not find out about it but from my doctor. And that's what I started realizing. The more people I interviewed who used this therapeutically, the more I realized that they were figuring it out from the guy at the gym who is bodybuilding. They were figuring it out from Facebook. They were figuring it out from Instagram, but they were not getting the information from their doctor.
Yeah, I was at a conference earlier this year in Phoenix. It was put on by, a hospital and endocrinologists and epileptologists and all those other ologists. And it was a conference about a ketogenic diet for basically brain stuff. And the Q&A sessions from the doctors were, why is this not a frontline, thing that's offered? And they're just really, really hesitant to, because of the way they're trained. I think, this is my own opinion, the way they're trained is that, diet, is a doesn't really have that big of effect, right? Like it's not a first line therapy. I mean, they're trained that like medications are really what's going to fix this. And this is something, seriously wrong. And the diet is just like going to have negligible effect, right? So the medications are the things that are going to be the powerful things that really can change things that are happening. But you and I both know that diet is extremely powerful, especially in something like this. And so we've got a long way to go before that is offered to people. And, the other thing they say too is that, it's really hard for people to implement, especially, in this food culture we have in this world where parents just feed kids, lots of convenience, garbage carbs, and it's too hard. And
stands for the, carbonated, refined sugars, additives, and processed foods.
Yeah.
And I think the other piece about the physician resistance is really just a lack of understanding. And a lot of people really think that it is the traditional ketogenic diet, actually TDK, in which everything has to be weighed and measured down to the milligram, and high doses of MCT to supplement, those kinds of things, which is not in reality what the majority of us practice when we are using this therapeutically.
Okay.
It's so much easier than that. And what the literature shows is that the traditional ketogenic diet works best for children under the age of 2. But for anyone over the age of 2, then a modified Atkins diet is what works as well. And in some minor cases, they may have to become a little bit more strict, but I actually talked to Dr. Kossoff about this last time I saw him at a conference. And I said, when you're doing the research and looking at the people who are poor responders to a ketogenic diet, are you actually taking into consideration the possibility that those people who have been on anti-epileptic drugs for sometimes many, many years have developed food sensitivities to ketogenic foods? Because I've spoken to a number of people now who have significant food allergies to coconut and avocado. So if you are just lumping all those people into the group that did not respond to keto, maybe you need to delve in there a little bit more and see if there are food sensitivities that are actually triggering the seizures. Once removed, maybe you will have significantly higher proportion of responders. And nobody's looked at that yet, but I planted the seed in his brain. And so I really hope somebody will look at that in the future, because I think it's a good possibility.
Well, let's talk about that. What your diet was like in the beginning when I always get bonus kitty hairs on me here. Let's talk about what was your diet like first when your husband was the main cook for you. Was it more extreme then, or did it? And you shared how you changed, a couple months in, or almost a couple months in, with eliminating those exogenous estrogens or xenoestrogens, right? But what was your approach in the beginning, and how has it morphed over the last 3 years?
That's a super question. And I think it's a really important one, because what I don't want is for people to think, oh, I might try this, and then to get dissuaded. I'm a big believer in biohacking. So when I started full on weigh and measure everything. Mm-hmm. And I started with very, very high fat, usually above 80%. Mm-hmm. I didn't worry too much about calories, because it was really hard for me to eat, above a calorie deficit with that much fat. And I haven't eaten anything, that hasn't been a calorie deficit for the last 3 years, because nowadays I only eat 1 or 2 meals a day. But back in the time, I definitely, I was still bound to the 3 meals, 2 snacks kind of mentality. Mm-hmm. And so, I would have my breakfast, my eggs and bacon, and I ate a lot more bacon in the beginning than I do now too. So I definitely had, eggs and bacon for breakfast. I would probably have a couple of fat bombs, coconut oil, cocoa butter mixed together with some stevia, some whatever struck my fancy at the time. I'd have those for snacks. I would definitely have a lot of fatty tea. I didn't use the coffee, because coffee actually boosts estrogen. So I got rid of my coffee, sadly, but I still have it once in a while. But I switched to tea, and then, lunch would be salmon, broccoli covered in butter. Dinner, probably something similar again, 3-4 ounces of protein, as fatty protein as I could source, as clean protein as I could source. Lots of big salads with cheese and lots of olive oil and nuts and seeds. And then I would have treats. My husband is an amazing keto baker, like absolutely amazing. I tell him he should open a restaurant and we would be wealthy, but he prefers to build things out of stone. So not going to do that anytime soon, but he would make me keto cheesecake, which I adore. And I couldn't do this diet, I don't think, without cheesecake. I don't think I could have been so successful. So I have to admit to my weakness there, that cheesecake is on the menu. And I would have that pretty routinely. I'd probably have fat bombs almost every day and little treats, keto treats, every single day for that first year. By year 2, I had cleaned up my diet a lot. So I was really trying to avoid any kind of processed stuff. I was using a lot less sweetener. I was using more stevia at the time. I'm using less of it now. Thanks to Dr. Fife's book, I'm using less stevia now.
Which book?
That's the Stevia Deception.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm definitely cutting back on all my artificial sweeteners, but that in particular. And I started cutting out meals. I really could not handle eating breakfast at all. So I would just have fatty tea in the morning. And then I would have big salad for lunch, and then protein and green leafy vegetables or broccoli at supper. And, no wine, sadly. I didn't do any wine at all for the first year. Started to bring that back in a little bit in year 2. But one of the things about being on a ketogenic diet for any length of time is you become really cheap date. So I can handle 2 ounces and, then I need my bed. So it's not, I don't even like opening a bottle of wine unless I have friends around, because I know it's going to get wasted. And now my diet has changed a lot. So definitely every year I get cleaner. I eat a lot less. I do intermittent fasting almost every single day. I have at least 16 to 18 hour fasts. Frequently I will do 3-day fasts. I'm about to embark on a 5-day fast. One of my Instagram buddies has kicked my butt and said, I got to do it. So
when are you doing it? I should join you. I've done a couple of 3, but I haven't done a 5 yet. So.
Okay. Well, why don't you get together with me? We'll do that. And
okay.
My 3-year ketoversary.
Yeah.
And that'll be fun, because I'm going to need all the support I can get. And it's not because I'm hungry. I don't get hungry when I'm fasted at all. That the mental challenge of being around food and of being around social environments where food is always available, that's much more of a struggle for me than actually being hungry.
Yeah.
So now I don't eat very, very much. And in fact, I do DEXA scans every year because I really want to know. It's back to that whole me being a science experiment thing. So I want to know exactly what fat mass I have lost, what lean muscle mass I have gained. So I started weightlifting, resistance training, probably about 10 months ago now. I guess it was, like January. And I started it seriously at that point. I'd sort of been dabbling before that, realizing that, as my age, perimenopausal woman, it's important to do resistance training for bone health. But I really started doing getting really into it, loving my deadlift day, loving my benching day. And it has made a big difference. But everyone says, you can't gain muscle unless you're eating at least 1 gram of protein per kilo of body mass. You can't, or you'll definitely lose weight if you're in a calorie reduction over time. And you know what? Last year, I did not lose a single pound, not one, on the scale. But I lost 6.5 pounds of fat, and I gained 6.5 pounds of lean mass.
Nice.
So I love seeing that on the DEXA because I can actually see it.
Yeah,
now, I nice. Boston and lost 4 pounds. I don't know what happened there. Eating brisket all the time. But yeah, so that's, and I've been in a calorie deficit every single day because I physically cannot eat more than 1,600 calories in a day, and I just feel sick, and I don't have a gallbladder, so it makes it a little harder to to process the fats, and I take bile salts to try and mitigate that. But it's been an interesting experiment for sure.
Yeah, well, it sounds like a successful experiment.
I like to think so.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of obvious to me, but like, what keeps you going with this? Like this is one of the biggest arguments, the doctors will say of why they don't want to recommend it is, well, it's highly unpalatable. It doesn't taste good. It's so hard to follow it. It's so hard to stick with it. We know that's not true, but especially when you're describing your diet in the beginning, even like, salmon covered in butter and broccoli, like, cheesecake and all this stuff, right? I blame it on, when this diet came out in the 20s and 30s, we didn't have the amazing chefs that we have now. And, they were just trying to make kids drink, shakes made with corn oil and soybean oil, right? Like if you were doing it that way, that's not tasty, not palatable, and not sustainable. But yeah, what do you, how do you stay motivated to keep doing this? Like, and especially after you've been symptom free for so long, do temptations crop up, or what keeps you going?
Well, that's a really good question. And occasionally temptation does crop up. I find that in the first year, I really missed bread. In the second year, my husband discovered a couple of really great pseudo bread recipes, which I would have every once in a while, toasted and covered in peanut butter. But I don't even do that anymore. And the keto treats, hardly ever. I do admit to a Carrie Brown ice cream addiction that I've just developed. And I'm trying really hard to say I'm only making one batch of her ice cream a month. Otherwise, I'm just going to eat it every day. But I don't eat treats every single day anymore. I don't even eat them every week anymore. And that's also helped with bringing down the artificial sweeteners. And yeah, I mean, keto is as palatable as it gets. I mean, what tastes better than fat? Nothing. Everything tastes awesome with fat in it. And my palate has changed so much. I bite into a strawberry now and I can, it's an orgasmic experience. I can have all the nuances of the flavor, and the sweetness is just mind blowing. But I remember the days I used to dip my strawberries in sugar. And I don't need to do that anymore. And in fact, while I was tasting some of the samples at KetoCon, I was saying to the developers there, you guys need to have sort of Keto 1 and Keto 2, because a lot of people need, that sort of help getting onto keto and still feed their sugar addiction. But once you've been on for a while, your palate changes so much. I can't eat most of that because it is too cloyingly sweet for me. Yeah. So I'm, whenever I make anything, I usually use a third or a quarter of the recommended sweetener in whatever recipe I'm making, or my husband's making, because let's be serious, he's the one who actually does most of the keto baking around here. But certainly it's totally doable. And in terms of motivation, that's easy. I don't want seizures. So that's pretty easy to be motivated.
Yeah.
I do, from time to time, have the question float across my mind, am I feeling okay today? And if I have that feeling, I take my ketone levels and I watch my carbs very carefully.
Okay.
If I haven't even thought about it, then whatever I'm doing is working. And sometimes, I mean, in the early days, I was 20 grams of total carbs a day, period, did not go over, watched everything, watched every supplement that went in my mouth. I was very, very careful. Now I will have days on occasion where I'll get up to 40 or 50 grams of carbohydrate, but 30 of them will be fiber. So big salad days. And for the most part, if I'm doing that while I'm exercising or dragon boating or having a big cardio day, that works for me. But I couldn't do that every day. There's no question. I need to be under 25 to 30 total grams of carbs for me to feel at my optimal level of functioning.
Okay. So let's talk about then the difference between what I'll just call the keto fad diet for weight loss, or nutritional ketosis, whatever we want to call that. Everybody's jumping on that bandwagon, and a therapeutic ketogenic diet.
Absolutely. Well, I have a 28-inch waist right now, so it's not a fad diet. I have 28-inch thighs too. But that's
a diet that you can stick with for 3 years and maintain the weight loss and keep going. Yeah, it doesn't sound like a fad to me.
And exactly. And I think that's what's really important. And the other thing is, keto is going to be different for everybody. And there is such a broad discussion around that. And I think it's important to have the questions, what does it look like for you? Because it's not going to look the same for me as it does for other people. And I think that changes over time. So does keto work for weight loss? 100%. Absolutely. Yes. I can't tell you how many amazing transformation stories I have seen and amazing people I have talked to who tell me that with the weight that they lost, they also gained mental clarity, emotional stability, mental stability, lost anxiety and depression symptoms. There's a lot that ties into that. And I think there's so much more about that gut-brain axis that we still really don't know about. And I think part of what keto does is really lower that inflammatory response in the body and enable healing. That said, there are some people who don't seem to respond well to it from a biochemical perspective. Their blood work doesn't look awesome, and that's a whole nother discussion. But there are still questions that need to be asked. And, one bad cholesterol test does not necessarily mean that keto is not for you, but it's definitely something that needs to be discussed with, health professionals who get it. And that's part of the issue, is that health professionals don't always get it. And I know my own doctor, when I went to her and I said, I want an NMR lipoprofile done. And as you and your listeners probably know, an NMR lipoprofile looks at particle size as well as particle number within the greater lipid profile panel that most people have done. And the first time I asked her, she said, but I can't do that. And I said, well, why not? She said, because I don't know how to interpret it. I said, but I do, so I can teach you. And she said, no, I'm going to have to send you to a lipidologist for that test. And I said, I'm not wasting taxpayers' money for that. And I went to my endocrinologist and said, could you please put it on, my hormone workup? And she did. And then I took the NMR profile to my family doctor and said, so here it is. As you can see, everything is golden. And by the way, just in case you ever have someone starting keto who has cholesterol levels you're not happy with, that's when you run your NMR. And this year when I asked her for my repeat NMR, she said, sure, no problem.
Yeah.
That was
well, and I'll just insert in here though. I'm gonna put a link in the show notes to Dave Feldman's website, Cholesterol Code, because what we think we know, even about the NMR, isn't what we think we know. So there's a lot more. Even if somebody's doing keto and they've got a NMR panel that they not happy with, that doesn't necessarily mean that this isn't working for them as well. So we'll just put that teaser in there. I'll link it in the show notes if you want to know more about how dynamic the cholesterol system is. That link will be down there. Yeah.
Cummings as well. He's got a lot of really.
Oh yeah, the Fat Emperor. Okay, yeah. We'll put that. Okay.
Yeah, he had a great talk at KetoCon as well, and just really interesting. Every time I hear him talk, I learn something new. And that's right. It's learning, and we're each individually. We have our own level of metabolic damage, and we have our own story. So I think that's an important note, is that keto needs to be individualized. It's not one size fits all, and one macro is going to fit for everybody. And I get sad actually when I look at some of the stuff online and I see people hating on individuals for pursuing a particular path or saying it's always calories, bottom line. And it's just so much more complicated than that.
Yes.
And I really think that individuals need to hack for themselves. So I encourage everybody to read, watch YouTube videos, listen to what speaks to you. And if you're not finding success, just keep digging, because there is a path, and you may require some really serious tweaking when it comes to FODMAP foods or foods that you have sensitivities to that are really preventing you from achieving the health goals that you want. And that kind of brings me back onto what you were asking for before about the therapeutic versus nutritional. So nutritional ketosis is a lower level of ketosis. If we're going to follow, Stephen Pinney's sort of guidelines, anything over 0.05 is considered nutritional ketosis. And that's a great place to be. And people can swing in and out of ketosis as they are meant to be and be metabolically flexible. And that's great. I don't think everybody needs to be in ketosis 365 days a year. I really don't. But it's great to be able to have the enzymes that allow the flexibility. And that's how we were designed. So I think that's...
Yes. High fives. I totally agree with that. Yeah.
But when it comes to therapeutic ketosis, you're talking about much higher levels of ketosis. And, there's that whole ratio piece. So if your blood sugar and your ketones are roughly on par, then you are said to be in therapeutic ketosis.
Okay.
That said, to my knowledge, and I've read pretty extensively on this subject, there are no studies that correlate specific ketone levels to therapeutic outcomes for anything, whether it's cancer or epilepsy. I could be super great at 1.2, to 3. That's actually my happy zone. I'm pretty happy there. Anything over 3, I don't feel good. I don't sleep. I get flushed. You can see my ketones are up now because I actually had a pretty heavy duty workout session before. And I don't feel well over 3.
Okay.
But, my friend Andrew Scarborough, who I have also had the privilege of interviewing and writing about, if his ketones got into the range of 3, he'd be having seizures.
Oh, interesting.
For him, he needs to keep them high. And different people are going to have different zones. And when you're looking at your ketone monitor and you say, oh, look, I have 4, what does that even mean? Because it doesn't necessarily mean that you are utilizing your ketones effectively. What it means is that you're making them and that you have a bunch on storage, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you are using them. And one of Patricia Daly's slides at her talk in Tampa was amazing. It was awesome and really enlightening, because she compared blood beta hydroxybutyrate ketone levels, which is what I take every single day along with my blood glucose, with Ketonix acetone exhaled ketone monitors. And basically, if you've got really high acetone and moderate ketones, what it means is that you are using them for fuel effectively. But if you have low acetone and high beta hydroxybutyrate, what it means is that you have an ample supply, but you may not be using them very efficiently to actually use as fuel. So when you look at those two things in juxtaposition, I love that word, then you can really see some cool stuff happening. But when I see people chasing ketones, my answer always comes out, how are you feeling? And are you achieving what you want, whether that's seizure freedom or not metastasizing your brain cancer, or having relief from Parkinson's symptoms? How are you feeling? Because if you are not feeling good, then you need to do more tweaking. It doesn't mean that it's not for you, but it means that there's some more biohacking that needs to happen.
Yeah. Very, very cool stuff. Wow. Okay. Yeah. So we might see a day soon where you've got both meters going, so you can really get, or somehow a meter that, that I don't know how they could do both at the same time. It's got to be
I don't know either.
Very funky machine, but
that's for some engineer to figure out.
Yeah, I'm going to be participating in some research. The dinner that I'm organizing in Seattle next week, we've got some researchers there that are going to be comparing the blood ketones and breath ketones, and they're going to be publishing that research soon. So it's some published research that's going to be looking at that. Now, I don't know that they're correlating symptom relief or anything more of that. They're just looking at the relationship between those. So, the other thing that, kind of goes back with what we were talking about earlier, I'll just plug it in right now because, what percentage of people do you think are out there that probably have some form of epilepsy that are undiagnosed or unaware? The reason I'm asking this is because you and I were talking at dinner the night that we met, and I started sharing with you, a symptom that I have that's still lingering from my car accident, where it's just like a momentary, feels like my brain kind of goes offline. I don't fall over or pass out. Nobody even notices it. It's just a really weird feeling. And I've talked to several people about it, and you were saying like, that sounds like it could be an absence seizure. And so it just really opened my mind or eyes or awareness to, I wonder how many other people have something like that, whether it's because they've been in some kind of head trauma situation or it's just something else that isn't working quite right in their brain. Do you have a sense of, percentage of the population that's undiagnosed? Or
I don't, to be honest. I mean, I could pull a number out of the air, but it would literally be that. However, I do feel that, when you're talking about diagnosing epilepsy, it's because it's having an impact on your life and your quality of life.
Yeah.
So if it is going undiagnosed, then chances are whatever you're experiencing, you're able to morph into your life, and it's not causing you to have a car accident or, preventing you from being able to work. I think lots of us have that. I mean, we all have moments, and I certainly notice that I still do, I won't say I go offline, but I perceive that I have been locked onto a focal point for more seconds than maybe I would normally.
Okay.
And when that's one of the things that makes me think, am I feeling okay? And then, check what I ate and see if maybe I got exposed to too many carbs by eating out somewhere. But for you, I think, if that were to change, if that were to leave its baseline and to last longer or morph in some other way, then I would really recommend going and having, an EEG. Now, that said, I've had hundreds of EEGs. I have never had a seizure on an EEG, even when I've taken the portable ones home, even when they've kept me in the hospital. I don't. But thankfully, we have technology now that allows me to film them when I'm having seizures. So I was able to do that to show doctors, but nothing was ever captured on EEG. I do have epileptic form wavelengths captured on EEG. Whenever I get the strobing or the hyperventilation, they will tell me that I have an abnormal brain rhythm. But that got better after I started keto, because I actually have my EEGs that I can compare. Okay. And the megahertz that they're comparing it at actually did improve after I started keto.
Yeah, and mine, I did some hyperbaric oxygen therapy that pretty much relieved mine, and I might. And that's one of those things, the more you can do, the better, but it's a very expensive therapy, not covered by insurance for this purpose, actually. And so I may go in and do some more of that for some.
In a perfect world, I think hyperbaric oxygen therapy is just on the leading edge too. I think there's some really neat stuff happening there with cancer. And, prior to radiation treatments, I've heard some personal stories as well as read some of the research around that. And it's really fascinating.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to ask, so what, you're going to talk about your website, but I also just want to really quick throw in here, like, what are your top tips or recommendations if somebody's listening to this and they're like, oh my gosh, like keto might be the answer for my epilepsy or something else that's going on. Like, what are your top tips for, how can they get started, or what should they do? Or
that's a great question. And that's actually one of the reasons I decided to make a website. So
okay, perfect.
And it's in under my resources. I have videos, I have books, I have research articles. It's broken down into epilepsy, cancer, Alzheimer's disease. I haven't done the weight loss thing yet, because keto for weight loss is everywhere. I mean, anybody who's got a cookbook out is has good information there.
Yeah.
But really, I was looking to try and support the therapeutic community a little bit more. Definitely the Charlie Foundation and Matthew's Friends are the very first places I would go for information on starting a ketogenic diet if you have epilepsy. Okay. They were incredibly helpful for me. There's a great support system there. There's a community there. There are online communities of people who use keto for their children or for adults. I found that the majority of them are actually for children, because of course you can control a child's diet a lot more easily than an adult's. But I've helped adults, and I've just said, start. That's what you have to do. You just have to start. And from that starting point, you can do the tweaking. Yeah. I would always encourage people to start a little bit more on the side of tracking than on the just forget about calories, forget about macros, just count your carbs and, eat lots of green leafy things. I think that's a little too simplified if you're looking at this from a therapeutic perspective. Okay. But that's just me, right? That's what was successful for me, and other people may just not even be able to start unless they need to super simplify it, and then that's okay. But if it's not working, then you might need to tighten up on those carbs a little bit, and play it by ear. But certainly you just start, and the Charlie Foundation has phenomenal resources.
What's the name of your website?
My website is Keto All Day Every Day.
All right.
KetoAllDayEveryday.com.
Awesome. And we'll link that down below too. I've got a list of things I'm going to be putting in the notes down below. So
that's fantastic.
This will be a good resource thing, and we'll link back to there. So was there anything else that you were hoping I would ask you about, or that you were hoping to share?
Yep. There's one thing. While we were in Austin and I had the opportunity to meet with so many wonderful, motivated professionals, I've had this idea lingering for a while that the keto community could actually really step up and fund the nutritional studies that we want to see. there is no big pharma that is going to fund nutritional studies in the way that we want to see them. And it came to my mind that, you know what, we all pay $5 at Starbucks once a week. Why wouldn't the hundreds of thousands of people who are now in the keto community not band together and actually put their money where their mouth is and say, yes, I want to see research that is nutritionally focused for specific things that we know this works for, but we just don't have the research to make this happening on a regular basis or make doctors suggesting it on a regular basis. And so out of that, like my dream is to actually have a committee of some of the biggest brains in the world, along with some lay people who can take in research proposals, sort through them, pick the top 8, and then put it out there to the keto community and say, what do you want to fund? And then have a great big Dropbox where we can dump the money and make these happen a whole lot faster than they're going to happen if they just go through the academic routes.
Yeah.
But I thought I had to start somewhere. and I couldn't start with raising $1 million in the next year, much as I would love to. Maybe that'll happen, but that's not where I'm going to start. And one of the interviews that I did, and the interviews are all on my website under Keto Lifers. And they've been up at ketogenic.com, which is another amazing resource if anybody's just starting. I highly recommend that you suss them out. They've got something for everything there, and it's very digestible. It's all it's not too sciencey, but it's all backed in science, which is what I really appreciate about that site. So all of these stories were up there, and hopefully they'll be back again. They're doing some changes on the websites at the moment, but you can access them through mine. And one of these stories was with Barbara Manati, whose daughter, Letizia, has a very rare glycogen storage disease called McArdle disease. And I knew nothing about this before I started in the keto universe, and sort of happened across Barbara's story. And I was just so struck that her beautiful, wonderful, vibrant little 9-year-old daughter, who spent 11 months in a wheelchair, got up and walked to school 3 days after starting a ketogenic diet.
Wow. 3
days. So you or I take 2 weeks to get into keto. McArdle's patients take 3 days. And right now, there is no research on keto and McArdle's, absolutely none. And the going recommendation is that these people who cannot convert glycogen in their muscles to glucose for energy basically drink pop every day.
Yeah, drink glucose
so that they
all
have
day long.
Glucose in their blood the whole time. But that just makes them obese and metabolically seriously challenged. Yeah. Whereas giving them alternate fuel in the form of ketones changes their life profoundly. And her story it made me bawl, and I hope that the way I've written it is going to really be impactful. But what I want to do is I want to do $70,000 for McArdle's research that we can go right now. We've got the researchers, Dr. Stacy Reason, who also has McArdle herself, Jeremy Michelson, who's I believe he's in San Diego, is a researcher. And I'm so excited to say that Ryan Lowry and Jake Wilson from the Aspie Lab in Tampa are also going to collaborate on this project. All we need to do is get them the money. So the keto community needs to come out right now, slap 70 grand in that bank account so that we can start recruiting real people in December and have this published 6 months later. Can you imagine the impact that would have? First of all, it'll be really sexy in the newspapers. Second of all, doctors will actually know what a ketogenic diet is because they'll be able to say, oh yeah, that all kind of makes sense. And then maybe, just maybe, when people go to their doctor and say, I'm thinking about trying this out, their doctor will be on board. Mm-hmm. So I think, I've seen some Facebook groups that have 200,000 people in them. But if we can all get together, or if, 1,400 people out there can find another 10 people to all pitch in $10, we got it done. We got it done. And I think the time is now. I really do. I think the keto community is so passionate. We know the difference it has made to us. It's time to let that be known from a scientific perspective. And the only way to do that is with human trials. And I just really hope the keto community is going to get behind this, because putting it all out there.
Yeah. So do you have it set up that people can donate to that now?
I do.
Is that
Yeah,
is that
I've
your
already
website?
set up a you sharing page, and it's up and running. They can donate right through the website. And I'm really hoping that we'll have all the money raised by, I know it's crazy to think, but by December, because these scientists will be ready to start recruiting for this project in December. And one of the hardships around this is that the McCardles community is talking about keto because it really makes such a huge difference to them. So we need to find people who've just been diagnosed and haven't started a ketogenic diet.
Okay.
So the faster we do this, the easier it's going to be to pull, this research together. And then the next time a child is diagnosed with this disease, then that child is going to actually get the right information right from the get-go, instead of saying, yeah, you need to start putting your kid on Coke twice a day. And the community really believes that this is underdiagnosed, and that there are a lot of kids who've been labeled as lazy and, just not liking athletics, who probably have this or some other form of glycogen storage disease that's just been underdiagnosed. So there's a big potential for some incredible news to be made, lives to be changed profoundly, pain to be prevented, and I think we're the ones to do it.
Yeah, remarkable. That's really, really exciting. Yeah. making things happen. Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah, this is great. Yeah, that's this is, we've experienced this as this whole community just comes together in just a loving embrace, and we all just want to help everyone we can with what we know has been so transformative for our own health. So I just applaud you for continuing that whole mission and getting more people well. So,
well, thanks, Carole. And I mean, the only other piece to my website, which is just in its infancy right now, is a poster hall. And I know you've been to a couple of big conferences before, but some of your listeners might not be familiar with what a scientific poster actually looks like. But what I want to do in my perfect dream world is to gather those anecdotal stories of therapeutic and nutritional ketosis, people who've lost lots of weight, who've really found keto has changed their lives positively, and put them in this elegant, simple format where they can all be displayed in this online poster hall. So researchers can come and they can look at the methods and say, wow, all these people are basically eating the same macros and having these amazing results. Maybe I should do some research there, whether it's weight loss or bipolar disorder or fibromyalgia or whatever. So anybody out there listening who would like to put together a poster, I have a walkthrough on the website as to how to do it, and I'm happy to help individuals do it as well. I'm just making a simpler template today, actually, just before we got online.
Oh, cool.
I'm really hoping that that's gonna be a cool thing that will develop over the next year.
Oh, fun. Cool. It's like a high school science project, only way more powerful.
Yeah, that's me, high school science.
Yeah. Well, Gillian, I thank you so much for being here. I just have one final question for you. The meteor, it's coming to Earth today. We all know it's our last day on the planet. We're all, demise is imminent. What's going to be your final meal?
Oh my gosh. That's a really good question. I'm going to have to think about that for a second. My final meal. I think it would have to be keto sushi. I love sushi so much. Sushi and sashimi. And with that, I would have the amazing Burning Kiln wine that I just brought back from Niagara with my husband, which is so delicious and only 3 grams of carbs per liter. So it's very, very low carb and super delicious. And yeah, I would definitely have the wine, or maybe a scotch. I'm not sure. Depends. How big is the meteor?
It's going to wipe us all out. So yeah.
Then it'll be scotch. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe a little bit of both. Well, thank you so much for.
In the morning, that's for sure.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing all this. And thank you for all the hard work that you're doing to spread the healing power, get your message out there. I know this is going to impact so many people by getting your story out there and get to help more people. We've got a lot of things in the show notes down below, all the things that we've been talking about. If you've enjoyed this interview, give us a thumbs up. Subscribe if you want to see more. We've got more amazing stories of keto transformation and other providers out there that are doing really great work in the world. So check out all the other videos we've got here on this this series. So thanks for watching. That's all for now. We'll see you next time. Bye.